Good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Sandy Hart. This is the voice of Sandy Hart, and it's my delight to welcome you to V2020. I am the director of the Women and Girls sector, and I am here to give you a little bit of introduction and a housekeeping, and then I will go away and you'll hear from our wonderful host who I'll introduce to you in a moment. You're going to hear from some extraordinary women this morning. But first, let me start by warmly welcoming you to the Charter for Compassion. We play host to the global compassion movement comprised of more than 400 cities, 2,000 partners in 52 countries, organized into 12 sectors. The Women and Girls sector is otherwise considered the womb of the Charter. My name again is Sandy Hart, and behind the scenes, working hard to ensure that this is a comfortable call for you are our ambassadors, Brione Lathrop, Betsy Spano, and Susan DeGaio, and they are here again supporting this call. If you'd like to join us as an ambassador, find out more about the Charter, you can go to charterforcompassion.org and find us under partners. The V2020 series carries on the foundational intention of the Reaction to Response series, which was developed to provide us all a space to move from fear-based to care-based environment and to better understand our role in that. This call is recorded, and you'll get an email following this call with some key mentions, some links that are also mentioned on the call, and a copy of this recording. So no need to take copious notes if you don't have a pen and pencil handy, because you'll get as much as we can possibly put into an email for you and follow this call. A little bit of housekeeping. At the bottom of your screen, you will find a chat window where you can ask your questions, and there's also a Q&A window where you can type in your questions or comments. And because typically we like to know where you're calling in from, please do at this time take a moment, if you're calling in from your computer, to go ahead and type in where you're calling in from in the world. Just greetings from Helsinki or greetings from Israel, wherever you're calling in from, we want to know it. So take this time now, if you would, and share that. And then I'll finish up and then introduce you to Joan, which it's my delight to introduce, who will be bringing you a whole new level of creativity and energy to this webinar series. She has held this vision of V2020 for quite some time and has brought it to the Charter for Compassion. Joan Marie is the Regional Director of the Charter for Compassion, Women and Girls sector. She's also the co-founder of Compassionate Capital Region, and which is the Sacramento region area of California. She's owner of Mirth to Earth, and so much more. You can read so much more about Joan on our website under our leadership on our Women and Girls page. So now it's my delight to turn this call over to Joan, and she'll introduce you to her guests and of course tell you a little bit more about the series.
Hello, thank you everybody, and thank you for joining us. And it's really exciting. I'm seeing everybody's calling in from all these great places. So thank you for taking the time and to share with us. And I have some amazing people that I'm really looking forward to sharing with you. And we'll have a nice conversation about where we are as women in the world. So V2020 is our newest campaign to bring awareness to the United Nations 17 Sustainable Developmental Goals, +1. So we're talking about the 18th SDG of self-awareness and personal agency, where we feel that it will ultimately elevate the conversation of the sacred power of women, and that it will help dispel the past, sharpening our 2020 vision for the future, and moving forward into a society that works for everyone. Nice goal, right? So I'd like to introduce you today to JJ Jones. She's been involved with V-Day for Vagina Monologues for 4 years, Eve Ensler's global activist movement to end violence against women and children or girls. This year, she's directing her first V-Day production. She's done one, and there'll be another one on the 24th. And JJ likes to stir passion, empathy, and strength into the Sacramento anti-violence movement. So thank you, JJ, for being with us. And Tanya, we have, she has 25 years with the state of California and specializes in organization development as a performance consultant, coaching and developing managers in the area of human performance. She's a sought-after keynote speaker, and last year she performed in the Vagina Monologues, My Revolution Lives in This Body, and this year she just finished performing in a memory, a monologue, a rant, and a prayer. So thank you for joining us, Tanya. And we also have Noelle Cannon, and she was born during the apartheid era in South Africa, and she left there in '68, and since then has lived in various places throughout Israel. And Noelle works as a body-mind therapist using the principles of Hakomi psychotherapy. She's a published poet and translator, and she wrote the poem 1 Billion Rising in the wake of 1 Billion Rising events throughout the world, and reading the Vagina Monologues of Eve Ensler. So thank you, and we're all going to focus on the work of Eve Ensler and how she's really kind of planted the concept of 1 billion rising on the planet. So I'd like to ask each of you a question and then have you go around and share your thoughts. So the first question is, what called you to get involved with Eve Ensler's work, and how has that changed you? So JJ, you want to start?
Yeah. So I was walking down the street downtown, and I had seen a sign for auditions, and it didn't say what the auditions were for. They just said auditions. So I walked in and I said, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" And they said, "Oh, we're auditioning for the Vagina Monologues." And I was like, "The what? What is that?" And I heard all about it. I heard about how all of the funds earned from that show go back to, grassroots community anti-violence charities. And I could not be involved. So I auditioned, I made it in, and after I was in, I couldn't get out. I was like, you know what? Now that I've been on the stage, I'm all done. I just want to be a part of this. What more can I do? So I got involved with production. I got involved with just the behind the scenes stuff, all the footwork, flyering, getting the word out, collecting people to come and join this amazing movement. And now, since then, now the producers had reached out to me and they said, "Hey, Jay, how do you feel about, directing?" So that's what I'm doing this year. It's been really, really exciting, a really, really intense experience, and it has genuinely changed my life. Of this movement. From now on, it's never going to end because it's always moving forward. We're always progressing. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. And you also got to express yourself creatively this year too.
Yeah, this year I used to be, prior to my career now, I used to be a teacher, and one of the things that they really pushed was being able to teach in a lot of different learning styles. People are impacted by things so differently. Some people, are more hands-on, some people are more visual, some people are more audio. So I decided to this year incorporate music into my show. It really sets a interesting tone for the beginnings of each monologue and gets the crowd kind of invested audioly. I don't know if that's the right word, but yeah, it's very emotional. And then I also incorporated film into my project. I'm doing between monologues, I've got these kind of silhouette pieces kind of introducing what is going to be coming up next. And then at the very end, I did a lot of community outreach, and I've got my own personal Sacramento vagina interviews that I've got recorded, and things from the Women's March. And it's just a very empowering connection with people that I couldn't necessarily get right in the show. So yeah, it's a big piece of work. It's a big piece of art, that's for sure.
Right. Well, thank you. It's been really exciting working with you this year. And
Yes, you have been a wonderful asset to us. I'm so happy that you've been a part of this. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you. How about you, Tanya?
Well, for me, I come from a social activist family. I mean, my mom back in the 60s with the civil rights movement, actually being involved with the Black Panther Party and Black Muslims, and even experiencing the Watts riots and the civil unrest in Los Angeles. And I think I really got very involved in the HIV crisis in the late 80s and 90s. I seem to get involved in this stuff when it's not fashionable, it's not cool. It's like you put your life on the line kind of stuff, act up, we're going to make some stuff happen. I was volunteering with Weave around 1985. And I heard about the show. And once I saw the show, I was hooked. And what pulled me in was speaking the unspoken. Is that it was the first time in a public offering that I heard, my story, my sister's stories, and stories that we've heard for so long, but no one would talk about it. It wasn't mainstream. And so it really made a big difference with me. And so I got involved. I mean, started volunteering, actually had a couple productions of Vagina Monologues myself with a theater company. And so how it changed me is it moved me to action, is that the stories were so profound that how can you just sit and allow it to just keep happening? And so I found myself getting involved. Once the Women's March happened, it was like I was called to so many rallies, so many activities where I had a chance to participate. And I think one of the most profound experiences I had was when the Sacramento State University students, the Black Student Union, pulled together a march called Ain't I a Woman? And when I saw two of the women that were leading and holding the sign that were kids that I remember when they were 4 or 5 years old. And these women had their voice, they were standing in their power, and they're marching towards me. I was literally frozen because what I saw was an evolution. Our what I was looking at in the last few years, our kids have been so complacent and so comfortable. I have seen movement since this election like I've never seen before. And so to see that, I'm getting goosebumps right now, and not only that, to see these young women in the community continuing the agenda, it's just been life-changing.
That's beautiful. It's, back in the 90s, I remember when the Vagina Monologues came out, the paper could not print the word vagina. So I love that you said that we're speaking what's, technically the unspeakable, and yet we've all came from that place, right? Everybody has. So yeah, that's really beautiful. And it strikes me too that we have these movements, and yet there's this element that seems like, are we making progress? And I think that's one of the questions I want to talk more about. So thank you, Tanya. What about you, Noelle?
Well, I came across Eve Ensler simply online when, I don't even remember exactly how, but suddenly I was watching excerpts from the Vagina Monologues. And so I started looking into who is this woman. And I was so moved by her story. And then I understood that she was coming up with this whole revolution that seemed to me to be absolutely amazing. And I could feel the energy of it, even though I wasn't there. Israel did participate. We had marches here, we had meetings here. And to me, what was wonderful is that there weren't only Jewish women there. There were Jewish women, Muslim women, Christian women. We were all together doing listening circles and talking about women's power. And it was extraordinary to me. And at that time, I wrote a poem and sent it to her on the spur of the moment. You know, and then I just let it go because I thought, well, Eve Ensler, she's not going to answer someone she doesn't know from another country, and definitely not from Israel. So I sent it off into the ether, and that was that. 3 days later, I get an email from her. She was in the Congo, and her secretary had sent it to her, and she asked if she could put it on the website. And I was so moved by that. It felt like such a privilege, and it felt like being really part of something organic that touches me too. You know, I don't have to be an American in order to be part of this kind of revolution. Just being a woman is enough to be part of this kind of revolution. So that was intensely meaningful to me.
That's beautiful. Yeah. What I love about Eve Ensler's work, you know, and just the whole concept of 1 billion rising, that there's 7 billion people on the planet, that if 1 billion people get on the same page, that will create a shift in consciousness. And as we move towards the year 2020, that's really kind of the foundation that we've been working towards, is that what if the year 2020 was symbolically when all of us got greater insight, that we had a deeper awareness, a broader awareness of why we're really here, what our purpose is. And if that were the case, how would we prepare more fully to be here? And so I think Eve Ensler has been really monumental in getting a momentum going with her City of Joy, and also like JJ was mentioning too, that just locally raising funds for organizations that do the work for women and children in domestic violence and human trafficking, and awakening and getting people involved, like Tanya said, about the different movements, and especially with HIV, and we need that. We almost need some direction. We can be moved and stirred, but we don't always know what to do with that. So locally in Sacramento, the funds are raised this year for a Community for Peace, the Wellspring Women's Center, and the Sacramento Justice League. So all three of those are really involved in supporting women and children and families. So with what all of you have said, what do you feel that this experience has awakened in you most? Like what has brought you to this moment of where you are right now, and the direction that you're going in?
I know for me, this is the first time that I mean, at least that I've seen in Sacramento, that we are putting in another form of connection with people. Sacramento has a very, very incredible and impactful art community, and it doesn't matter whether you are, you know, straight or gay or non-conforming. It doesn't matter if you're Black or you're white or if you're Asian. It doesn't matter anything. What matters is that art is something that really, really connects us. And in every culture, there's art in every culture. And I think that if we're able to express and to change minds and hearts through art, then do it. You know what I mean? For me, it's been very challenging because everybody's art forms are so different, and the only ones I could include in my show are what I could include. But I feel that over time, the more people, you know, we reach out to, the more hearts we reach out to, the more art we're going to get, and the more we're going to perceive so much more. I think for now, I mean, moving on, it's going to be a huge amount of networking with all of these other people, and it's going to be a huge amount of listening more so than anything. It's listening. We spend so much time opening our mouths, and we spend so much time, spreading our news, but we don't spend enough time listening. And I think that if we are going to listen, if we're going to see or feel that art, we have to open ourselves, and it starts here. You know what I mean? That's how I feel. I think that it starts with ourselves and opening ourselves up and being vulnerable to that, kind of new information. So that's what I plan to do. I just want to be able to be vulnerable, and whether someone's opinion is different than mine, or not, it's going to be something that I really want to consciously be aware of and consciously just open up to.
Well, and I think the power of listening and also the power of being heard, that creates a common ground. And I think we can find our differences where we come together, where we do have similarities within that common ground.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah. And they say artists that's one of the most radical professions to be in, because you have the opportunity to express yourself through symbolism and color and stir people in different ways. So thank you.
Yeah.
How about you, Tanya? Oh, can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
Oh, now I can. Yes.
Okay. So when you say what has awakened me, well, I've always been woke. I mean, that's been my life. But I have to say the election was a catalyst for me. It let the beast out of the basement, if you will, that had been chained up there for years. It was like no more, and moved me to action. And at first my anger, was fueled, and I was just raging. And then it softened to grief. And the grief was not grief of what was, but grief of what could be or should be, that wasn't happening. And I think that moved me to action. And then the Women's March really encouraged me to ignite that rocket. And so I've been involved ever since then. The V-Day Sacramento folks, one of the things that they have are core beliefs. And I think this is pivotal in helping us change. And their core beliefs have to do with art, having the power to transform, and that in order for us to have lasting social and cultural change, it has to happen with ordinary people like us. It has to start with the grassroots level. We can no longer sit and wait for it to come from the top down. We have politicians in place that don't care about, our agendas. And so we need to get in office and make it happen. We need to look at the intersection of race, class, and gender and understand that all of this is balled up, and we need to start to take it apart, peel back those layers of the onion, if you will. So.
Absolutely. And I do think that in a lot of ways, the positive intent of the election was to kind of rattle everybody's cages and say, this is really happening, and is this the world you want to live in, and is this who you are? So I think that was really an awakening for a lot of people. We had record numbers with the marches, and I think it's going to March and April, there will be marches happening again, and I think that there'll be more and more people as well, and especially people wanting to support our youth, that they're standing up and saying no more, and we need adults to do things different for us. That in itself is a real wake-up call as well. So thank you. How about you, Noelle?
I think what affected me is, first of all, I found myself so moved by everything the two of you were saying. And I kept resonating with things as you were speaking, and that was wonderful. So what comes up for me is a sense of community. What being in community with other women, in communion with other women, is so important. And it just doesn't matter what color, what religion, nothing matters. Just that we have a goal that we're willing to pursue together. We're willing to listen, as you both said. And I feel that with the political dramas going on in the States, in my beleaguered country, just about everywhere in the world, it really is up to us. And I think that the work that Eve Ensler has done has pushed me to realize that if I don't do something, whether it's through art, through my writing, whether it's through creating a group of women and girls, it doesn't really matter, but I have to take action. It's not enough just to want something or to believe in something, but I have to act. And I find this both terrifying and exhilarating, particularly since I find myself in a very small country with a great many issues. And where do you begin? Where do you begin? So this has been the question I've been asking myself. How do I get involved in this country, inspired by what the women of America are doing? I mean, the marches in America, the American women, absolutely blew my mind. I felt such a sense of pride, of belonging, of wow, when I watched those women marching. It was amazing, and the borders just didn't matter anymore.
Well, and thank you. Yes. And now I think it's stirred so many people. We have right now, and there will probably be larger numbers, but there are over 1,000 women that are running for some sort of political office now, which is really exciting. So we're going to see a huge movement within the next few years. And one of the things that really stirred me that I wanted to share is that the year 2020, it's going to be the 100th anniversary of the right of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. And also, so it's hard to like compute that it hasn't even been 100 years that we weren't allowed to vote then. And so that in itself is really powerful. But also in the year 2020, it's going to be the 150th anniversary of the Mother's Day Peace Proclamation. And I'm so moved by her. It's Julia Ward Howe, that was right after the Civil War, when families were torn apart because of their beliefs. And so that was really the sole purpose of Mother's Day, and it was not meant to be commercialized. It was to create a place of peace where people could come together. And one of the things that she asked for that I feel really stirred me, that I have no idea how it's going to happen, but I want to be a part of it, is that she was calling, and to quote her, "In the name of womanhood and of humanity, I earnestly ask that a General Congress of Women without limit of nationality may be appointed and held at some place deemed most convenient and at the earliest period consistent with its objects, to promote the alliance of the different nationalities, the amicable settlement of international questions, the great and general interests of peace." That was 150 years ago. So I feel like, okay, it's time. let's get this thing rolling, right? So yeah. That's one of the things all three of you were so eloquent and beautifully said how you've been stirred. And I'm really curious what your thoughts are on how we can make things more mainstream. How can we get people more involved and getting stirred, getting involved in the vagina monologues? I know for me, it actually like changed me on an internal level, being involved and saying the words that were said, and honoring the women that spoke those words. And I'm curious what the three of you have to say about Queens for people. JJ, you want to go?
Yeah. Honestly, I think the way that I want to start connecting all of these people, I mean, I know from my experience, I've got friends that have children and kids, you know, of all ages, and a lot of the younger generation is incredibly more accepting. They're very it's like if someone's like comes out as transgender at school, it's like, oh, like, okay, like what pronouns do you use? There's a lot more
Acceptance.
open to that. Yeah, it's awesome. But I think for me personally, it's actually, I think that I want to start with just loving, just having these people, meeting these new people, connecting with these people. If you create a relationship with someone, they're more apt to saying, what do you do? What are you passionate about? And when you are able to share yourself and share what you love, they get passionate about it. And when you love someone, they hold on to that and they value it, and then they want to work with you on whatever you love. You know what I mean? And I think that means, like, if I need to mentor someone, if I need to help guide someone, if I need to be there for someone, you know, pour a glass of wine, if I need to help a kid out with their homework, if that means connecting with them and loving them, that will open up those doors. It's like, I don't even have to tell them right away, hey, you know, this is what you should do to be a part of this. It's just, hey, I'm gonna take you in as my little wing, I'm gonna take you under, I'm gonna love you, and then we're gonna connect from there. So I think for me personally, it's gonna be just being susceptible to love and being able to give love, the love that I can give in whatever form it may be. And that's where I get my connection in, big time.
I love that, being more susceptible to love. I think it's good to think of like love as a virus, and that it can be incurable, and we can create a mass. That's great. How about you, Tanya?
Well, I have to, you know, the love thing is what it's all about. I mean, women lead with a heart. And the one thing I know is that love transcends any perception of limitations. And so I've seen it happen. I've witnessed it. And I know that with love and this whole process that we can move mountains. I know that it's going to take local women because we know about our communities. We know what we need on the local level. And I just really am so excited about what's going to happen in the next 20 years with women in positions of leadership. This country is definitely going to change, and it needs culture change. And culture change takes a long time. It's, you know, it's that speedboat and the big luxury liner. You know, it's going to take time to make that turn, but it's okay, because I am so excited because we're in the process of moving the boat. The boat's been stuck for a while. And so now the boat's moving. It's on the water, you know? And so, yeah, it's going to take us a minute, because we're talking about structures and systems that have oppressed and systemic situations that have limited our ability to do what we need to do. And what I'm loving most is the unifying of our forces. I'm seeing groups coming together, you know, because let's face it, the resources are short, you know, that we have this one aim. Why not come together as this collective, and that we come to the table, and if they don't let us at the table, we create our own table. And that we have to be involved in the political process, from the election process, from running office, changing the culture of this country. And I'm just sick of the politicians that I feel every time I hear them, they're coming out, the stuff is coming out sideways. I can't trust them. And it's like, no, it shouldn't be this way. You should be for the people. And it's this time for that to change. I did some research in looking at different groups online. And I was just blown away with all of the national women groups that are out there. I'm talking about the universities. We're talking the medical profession, the legal profession, the media, communications, finance. What would happen if all of these folks with their competencies and resources came together? We came together. It would be so powerful. They want us to stay separate. They don't want us to unite. And that's what it's going to take, is us coming together, you know, whatever the personal agenda is, letting it go. What is the big vision? You know, that's why I like V 2020. What is the big V? You know, what is it that we're trying to accomplish here, folks? And so I am just so excited about where we are, that we are involved in the process and that we are moving. So, you know, I think social media has pushed us to where we are today, because we didn't have to worry about raising money or doing all this stuff. We just put our voice out there, instant. There you go. And then we're connected globally. So the Women's March, I don't think it would have been so profound if we didn't have that social media connection, because what it did is it empowered women all over the world. I can do this. I've been impacted by this. And you know what? I can get out there and march and walk and show my support and show solidarity. So just excited about what's to come. Can you tell?
Well, and I think that that's a big part of it too, is that, like, really by participating, we really get that visceral experience that we are making a difference. Mm-hmm. Because I think when we're in our own little world, it can be hard to feel like any of the work we're doing matters, you know. Mm-hmm. and so I think that's a huge piece. And with social media, like, how hard would this have been before to connect, you know, across the globe, mm-hmm. and be able to have a conversation like this. So yeah. I think it's really exciting, and to have different voices come forth in an arena, and more truth being told, you know, just like the information coming out about who the Black Panthers really were, mm-hmm. and you know, how the information was really distorted about right. How they were demonized in mm-hmm. the media, because the media was manipulated. And I think we're really seeing that now, that we are really manipulated by the media. And I think that's kind of where we're seeing a balance of truth, in that what is being called fake news, it's awakening us to do our own research. What is real? What right. is true? Right. And that's empowering us as well. So thank you, Tanya. How about you, Noelle?
I think while you've all been talking, my mind has been... One of the things that I think is absolutely imperative is to create a different language. The language of change, the language of how we wish to do things, needs to be different. It needs to command attention. And if we're using the same old expressions, the same old images, the same old everything, it's just going to float by us. And I think it's really, really important. In this country, I see it very, very strongly. We have a movement here called Women Wage Peace. And the importance of this group is that it's not a political, well, everything's political, okay, but it's not a political group per se. It's a social group. And there is room in it for everybody. So if you are Christian, Muslim, Jewish, left-wing, right-wing, conservative, an artist, a road cleaner, there's a place for you there.
What draws people there?
What?
What draws them to it?
Because women have had enough in Israel. Mm. Women have had enough of having their kids, their husbands, their brothers sent to war that many of us do not believe in. It's oh, that's nice.
Wage peace. Oh, wow. Look at that.
You see, that was one of the most incredible processions I've ever seen in my life. And we all ended up in Jerusalem. It was amazing. And to look around and see everybody who lives in Israel, everybody, not just Jews, but every woman who feels that she has a voice and who wants to use that voice, she's in this organization. And it's a feeling of realness, of normality, of how I want to live. How I personally want to live, where everybody has a place, everybody has a voice. And these women, they grew from a small number. There are now 50,000 women, which is nothing in terms of the States, but in a tiny country like Israel, it's a very satisfying number to begin with. And they aren't concerned with only getting their voice out, but with dealing with the issues that come up amongst us that make it hard for us to hear each other. So that we're doing groups now that work on how difficult it is for me to hear that someone is a settler, you know, and lives across the Green Line and lives on Palestinian land. I can't tell you what that does to me. And the battle I had with myself to open my heart, exactly what you were saying, JJ, to be susceptible to love. This is another woman. She's a mom like I am. She has given birth as I have. She's a woman. And on that basis, we have an enormous amount in common. And so she lives on Palestinian land. We do not have to deal with that while we're getting to know with each other. You know, there's a time and a place for things. And if we first create a relationship of mutual respect, of an ability to listen and to hear, there's a place for real dialogue. And this is what these women are doing. And I feel intensely proud because it's very difficult living in Israel with the views that I have, and that there are so many people who don't share them or who are very rude to me if I express myself. It's wonderful to me to know that there is this community of women who is going all out and who is not going to stop until they are heard. It's amazing to me.
That's go ahead, JJ.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think Charles is online and he had said something, and he just said it was answered. So
Oh, okay.
I also noticed another person had said, you know, social media has also been the one of the prime reasons why Donald Trump got so involved. And I think kind of like channeling what Joan was saying is you have to be able to find your own truth. And, you know, social media is filled with so much just bullshit. We could just say it, bullshit.
Yes.
There's a lot of bullshit.
Absolutely.
And I think something that I've learned is everybody has their own truth. Everybody has their own version, and they have the amazing power of the human mind where they get to choose what it is that they want to believe. And I think that there's a beauty in that. And that's also a connection, even if it's something that I don't believe in, it's something that I can connect with someone on. It's like, you can believe something and I can believe something. We both have the ability to make that choice, and making that choice is where that connection is. And it's being able to say, I'm listening to you, you're listening to me, you've made this choice, I've made this choice, and we have equal grounds on that.
And if peace is the objective, then we're both coming from our own perceptions, but we're sitting together for the same reason. We want our kids to be safe. Yeah. You know, when women are standing around a grave of a kid who's 19 or 21 who's been killed, it doesn't matter whether her womb is Palestinian or Christian or Jewish. It's the same womb. It is the same womb.
Yes.
And I feel very strongly about that.
Yeah, me too.
we're doing here locally is compassionate conversations that I think culturally here in the States, we haven't always learned the tools to better communicate, especially in difficult conversations.
Yeah.
And that's part of what we want to do is learn the tools so we're better equipped as individuals
Exactly.
how to deal with things, because you know, we don't always have that skill, even though we may want that. And that's part of what the plus one, the 18th sustainable development goal of self-awareness and personal agency. You know, I think it's really important that we start, these are the 17 and then the 18th is the proposed one. But all of these, the 17 goals are things that we have wanted for a really long time. But I think part of them, in the bigger picture, it's happened because we've lost our concepts of self-awareness and personal agency. And if we go back and become more accountable in what is our part in this not working and what is our part in making things better, that is what is really going to implement things for really quickly shifting. Like when on a personal level, when we have, I've always felt that some of my biggest aha moments are also duh moments, you know, that it's like, God, why didn't I understand that before, you know? So I think that that's part of the awakening, that there's always more for us to learn, and that when we make a mistake, it's just so much easier to just admit it instead of fighting that and trying to hide it. That takes so much more energy. So thank you. Gosh, this has been so amazing, and I can't believe we're getting close to being done. But I would like to have you read your poem. I think this would be a really great time, Noelle, if and you have a little story. Well, you talked about it a little bit with Eve, and I'm wondering if you could read that now, and we can kind of talk from there about what you have to say about 1 Billion Rising. We have
Okay. So this is called 1 Billion Rising, and I've dedicated it to Eve Ensler and to all of us, every woman on the planet. We step into our lives, bright beads of hope, one woman threaded to another. The thread of hope catches on a slash of pain, breaks, knots, flies up again. The thread of loss, the thread of rape, scars corrupt kindness, recovery a long, slow shape. The thread is pain, the thread is stop. And we will stand thread by thread, hand by hand, in Africa and in Asia, in the West and in the East. And we will dance and we will sing and we will shake the earth our very lives depend upon. We will restore our huge, thundering heart's ancient, pregnant roar. We will stand across the world, walk out, dance, rise up, soar. For we are 1 billion birthing, 1 billion rising, holding the thread, breaking the chain. We are Lucille Clifton's lovely line of women, stepping without fear or guilt or shame. We are Eve Ensler's girl cells, and the song of songs, the cry of hallelujah, the transforming of all wrongs. We are mothers and we are daughters, sisters and wives. We are every woman and each woman, distinct beneath the skies. We are beginnings and we are ends. We are wisdom and we are ripe. We are 1 billion rising, a current set alight.
Let's breathe that in for just a moment. Thank you, Noelle. It's beautiful, and I feel like that that in itself is, in a way, your monologue that you're sharing with us, and that thread that connects all of us. Tanya, you've played different roles in the vagina monologues, and now you were in the new play, and you had a whole new monologue. I think what Noelle is sharing is about that common thread connecting us. Share your experience?
My experience, and I was in both productions, and what was different about the monologue Memory and Prayer, was that the stories were raw. With vagina monologues, they've been done for so long. They're very polished stories, and still moving, definitely. But something that the rawness of this expression, and the difference for me, men were in the production. We had men. And so that uniting force showed us that men are supporting our cause as well. And not only are they supporting the cause, they feel moved to action as well. There was one of the monologues that was called, the men's prayer, where the three men were on the stage talking about what they're not going to do or what they're going to do, and that uniting force of supporting women, no longer doing this, that, and the other. That was very powerful. And I've never seen that in any of our productions. And so I think the men brought, another element that pulled community together, because the women have been doing this for a long time, but it's been a separate thing. And so this is the first time that I'm seeing it all come together, and when Eve did this in 2006, it was actually at a, believe it or not, Until the Violence Stops festival in New York City. And she asked all these writers, and she said she thought she would get a few, but she was overwhelmed. Everyone has a story, and we're talking, authors like Alice Walker that contributed, to the process. And so just to be involved with this, speaking about the pain in profound ways. Friends of mine saw both productions, and they said it was something about this one that moved them, differently, because it was so raw. I mean, it wasn't polished as much as the vagina monologue stuff, but it was powerful and moving.
And there were a lot more men in the audience as well. I've noticed that the last couple years there's been more men, but in that specific production there were a lot of men in the audience, and that's part of what we need as well. One of the things I've just kind of been sensitive to with the Me Too movement is we don't want to reverse the process of becoming the executioner. That there's a whole spectrum of inappropriate behavior that we need conversation about, and awareness that there are a lot of good men that don't mean harm, and they want to learn, and we need the conversation and not just shutting down. But we also need an arena to channel the pain. There's so much pain that's happened, and I think the play, I was really moved. Yours was it had the word banana in it.
Yeah, it was banana beer placed in Uganda during the Civil War.
And so that common thread, like Noelle was talking about, of being able to hear stories from all over, that because it's right there, that it brings you more into that personal experience where you actually get to connect. And I think that that's part of what really touches people, and the power of Eve Ensler's work in general. JJ, did you want to add anything about that?
It's my end is getting scratchy for some reason. It's really hard to hear everything that's being brought through. I think it might be. I was checking my Wi-Fi. I think it might be my side. Well, I mean, I'm I'm so disappointed because I can't stay for the after party because I want to. I have so much I want to say, but I think for me, just closing out on my end, I really want to emphasize. I would like to emphasize on connection and how incredibly important it is to stay connected, because I think a lot of times, you know, especially with things like the vagina monologues, it's like we have this amazing few months that we get to really connect and we get to perform and we get to put it on, and slowly but surely people start to fizzle out. And not that their passion for the movement starts to fizzle out, but it's just that that connection starts to fizzle out. You know, people get busy and you know, things happen, and that's something that I think we all experience. You know, it's like we get busy, we live our everyday lives, but I think it's very important to continue fueling that connection and feeding that connection, and in order for things to continue moving, it needs to be an ongoing connection. So I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's just what it is. You know, just stay aware. You know, like Tanya was saying, like, I am woke, I stay woke, like yeah girl, that's awesome, just stay awake, you know. And I think the truth about Donald Trump is, though, I mean, considering his approval ratings, it seems like he might not be a lot of people's favorite, but I think the unfortunate truth about it is that he had to be in charge, because if he wasn't, this connection wouldn't have been so passionate. I feel.
It would have been same old, and
exactly.
So, and thank you for mentioning the after party. And I know you do need to sign off in just a couple minutes. But I do really want to keep connection, and that was, you know, part of why I wanted to be involved in this with the Compassionate Women and Girls. I have been given the honor of being a steward of a red tent. So we have a red tent in Sacramento, which really, you know, just historically the tribes were more nomadic, and that they had a tent that was a place where women could commune, and all things happened there. Birth, death, young women starting their menstrual cycles, women not having to do the same type of chores when they were on their menstrual cycle, and that it was a place where women could really be deep and real and honest, and that's part of what I want to really be a part of in my community, is creating that space, that womb, where we are all safe to go and commune and rest and rejuvenate, because we need the energy so we can go out there too. So, it looks like we have some great questions that are going to continue on in the after party. So I invite everyone to stay on, and I am so grateful to you, JJ, and Tanya and Noelle. Noelle, your poem is so beautiful, and I think we're going to have it online for people to read, and I'd love as we move forward that we keep that message. It was so beautifully said, and I know that it touched many people. So thank you all. Tanya, you rock it. I love you. And JJ, I'll see you on Saturday. Is our final performance, woohoo, of Monologues in Sacramento, and for everyone in other locations, check. And February is the month for V-Day, and you can see what's happening locally and how you can help raise funds for organization. So thank you, JJ, and we'll see you soon. And
Thank
Tanya
you.
and Noelle are going to stay on with.
Bye, JJ.
So much love to you all. Thank you so much.
Love you, JJ.
JJ,
Love
you do rock. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
JJ. Okay, I'm going to preview promoting everybody into the call right now.
Yay.
So those who can stay, join us. It might just take a few minutes because we do this one at a time, but we are going to bring you all in. You'll start coming on in. Okay.
So we have let's see, Michigan, Salem, Dallas, Mumbai. Awesome. Israel. This is great. Virginia, Orange County. Okay, if the first woman
Beautiful.
God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, these women together ought to be able to turn it back and get it right side up again. Sojourner Truth.
Love it.
Let me say it again. If the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, these women together ought to be able to turn it back and get it right side up again. 1851. Isn't that amazing?
Amazing. That's beautiful.
Okay, and so Charles Barker is saying, loving even your enemy, how? And do we have the will to do that? JJ's on target with desiring to have true relationship with the best of each in mind, loving which involves tough love as well. Thoughts? So there's a love movement that's going on, and I think that that's a really big piece as well. The phrase that I heard was just being able to practice saying brother and sister. That's going to change our whole process. What are your others' thoughts about that, Tanya?
Well, I think, when we talk about change, I think, I go back to the grassroots community connection. As I'm hearing people talk about love and talk about women leading, the heart keeps coming up. I keep getting a vision of the heart. It's like my heart connecting to your heart. And if I can connect to your heart, then all that stuff sort of falls away, that divides us and keeps us apart. It's that humanness that we need to connect with.
Hi, this is Sandy, everybody. I'm just tickled and delighted and so pleased that you're all here, and thank you for hanging on. A good number of you hung on for the rest of this call. There was this common thread I kept hearing on the call, and there were two things I heard. Of course, we hear this a lot in this constellation of work that I suspect many of you join me in, and that is that it all begins at the heart level. Charter for Compassion, we say it starts at the womb, but there's a little difference to us women, I suppose. And that another thing I heard was changing the narrative. We have on our call with us Elaine Groman, who is just a spectacular, like all of you actually are, a spectacular woman doing incredible things in the world. And we were talking the other day about this conversation. We need a new dictionary. And she says, well, darling, I'm on it. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how powerful the vibration of our words, because I know I spell things differently now. I spell powerful with the dash between the power and the full, or grace between so let's just reframe and restructure the language that we're putting out in the world. I'd love to hear from, everybody. This is our time to talk. I'd love to hear from Elaine right now regarding that too. And then Chris has something to say.
Thank you so much. And it's just a complete honor to be in the presence of such extraordinary women globally. And thank you, Sandy, for asking me to speak about what I think is so important. Is myself, I'm an energy healer, and for the past 20 years, I've worked with people who really don't understand that I'm trying to help people understand, I should say, that every thought we have, every word we utter creates a biological response. Whether we understand the meaning of the word or not, it will affect us because everything is vibration. But when we have a deeper understanding of the actual meaning of a word, then we use our words with so much more conscious, deliberate action. And what we need to understand is many words have been designed actually to be degrading to half of humanity. And so, and we use words unconsciously because we are ignorant. And as I was saying, I think it was to Sandy yesterday, that there's two meanings to the word ignorant. So what I'm talking about is willful ignorance, willfully choosing not to pay attention to what we're saying. And then there is the common concept of ignorance, which is we simply don't understand or we simply don't know. So one of the things that I work with many times with my clients is to help to reframe the words they use so that they're less self-punitive, because that is so important as we learn to drive forward and move forward and walk forward and stand in our present time, which is such an honor to be alive at this time, is to really use the words that truly empower. And one word, just to give you an example, is the word responsible, which we kind of throw around a lot. But the word responsible does not mean duty. It means, what is your ability to respond? So what is your responsibility? So that we don't just jump into something with the notion, well, I must do this or I have to do this, sometimes begrudgingly. Then there is a completely different energy about something when you choose to respond to it. Then your heart is engaged in what you're doing.
Thank you so much. And to your point, Joan, I want to hear from you too. But my point, Joan, that is the intention of SDG 18, is to really stop and pay attention to our personal role in the world.
Yeah.
I know that Chris had something to add, but Joan, please take it away.
I just want to thank you, Elaine, and I hope that we will be able to have a whole conversation about this, and that's part of why our logo had a lot of V words on it, because throughout history, and this is part of what we need to just understand for our self-empowerment, is that there are words that were originally sacred. Sound was sacred in the beginning. So if we do the research, like just for example, the word virago, if you look it up in the dictionary now, it will say like a mean and crass old woman, or that it's a very negative connotation. Whereas the root, the word origin of virago was a brave female warrior, to be like the highest male warrior. And so it was respectful. And so that's part of my passion about, as we move forward, that we look at what has been made profane, reclaim it, and bring it back to its sacred place. And that in itself is going to create more and more empowerment. And that's really exciting to me. And I think that that's part of what the Vagina Monologues does as well, so you said somebody else wanted to, was it Chris? You said Sandy or?
Chris? Yeah, Chris had raised her hand on the call and we missed it. So, and I'm sorry for that, Chris. Yeah, please take this time.
That's okay. This is my first time. I was in a group last night, a women's group last night at my house with Susan DeGaia, and she invited me to come on the call this morning. I'm going to be 80 in March, so I'm often a historian. I want to just talk to you for a moment about what Elaine was saying. Thank you so much, Elaine, and so much to Noelle, who started that conversation about language. When I was in the women's movement, I'm still in the women's movement. When I was in the women's movement originally, the first thing we looked at was everyone was called a policeman, a postman, a fireman, and we began to change that by defining the names of those people as their job. So there became police officers, they became postal carriers, they became whatever. So we changed all that. We did stop with manhole cover. That was too difficult. But there were so many words that we changed. So right now, my particular interest in language has to do with the word human as opposed to the word male and female. It's not that I don't want to talk about men and women. I love that. But I think it's really important that we start talking about humankind instead of mankind. It's the one remaining piece. It's also in the Constitution, you know, that men are created equal. So when we were fighting for the ERA, we were simply fighting to include the language, men and women are created equal. Well, if we could just say humans are created equal, it would be fine. So my personal pet peeve has to do with this word, and I'm just going to ask you all to please put that in your consciousness about humankind being more important word than mankind. The other thing I wanted to say was I wanted to thank Tanya for what she was talking about when she was talking about change coming. Change is here big time, my friends. I come from a perspective that's a long time perspective. And I see the rise of the feminine. I've been waiting for it. I've been working for it my whole life. But I see it now with such an impulse and such an impetus. I'll just give you one example. I was in Nashville a few weeks ago, and my girlfriend was telling me that last year, I was in Knoxville, which is even smaller town. And they were saying that last year they had 1,200 at the Women's March, and this year they had 14,000.
Wow.
In 1 year. So when you think that, when you see these little small things that are happening, think about that. That's a huge change in a small, local, insular community that's, you know, in the South, which is not exactly the place where progressive ideas come from generally. So I'm not maligning the South, mind you, but this is a huge change. And I just ask us to notice how we are already making the kind of progress you're talking about as though it were in the future. It's actually surrounding us. So I just want to thank you for this opportunity to say that. And I'm really happy I was on the call. And thanks for asking.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Gretchen wanted to share something.
Oh, I did. Sometimes people will poo-poo the power of like language and myth and symbols. And so you can imagine that my daughter, who's now 29, was raised with a very liberal, progressive mindset. And when she was about 6, she would tell people she wanted to grow up to be a man because all of the good jobs were jobs held by men. And so I think I just wanted to share that because it was such a powerful reminder when you said that of the power of language in the little girls. And I've been really fascinated by the movie Wonder Woman and the impact that this is having on very, very young girls. And without going into it too deep, but I saw Gina Davis speak, and the representation of women and young girls in the media is pathetic. And the whole #MeToo movement really ramped up 2 months after Wonder Woman came out. And I was all my friends were seeing it. And I'm like, oh, for goodness sake, like it's a superhero movie. But I went to see it, and I think that there is this sense of being very mindful about how we represent ourselves, what we tell our little girls, because the fact that my little girl thought she had to grow up to be a man, to be someone important, and now she's a civil rights lawyer, that's really sad. And we need to share that with more people, more humans, saying this does matter. It's not some esoteric conversation.
Well, I just want to respond to that, Gretchen, because I think because you were aware of it, that helped pave the road for her to become a civil rights lawyer. So that's really a kudos to you of your awareness. And yes, we are changing. And I think that's really exciting. And the fact that as we choose these words, that is what's really going to change the landscape as well. And that's part of why I think Eve Ensler's work is so important too, that to say these words I have the role this year of reclaiming cunt. And that's such a trigger word for so many people. And as I did the research, what I found was that it was made profane. That originally it's in many cultures. There's the root of it, kuni, kunti, kunta, that they were all sacred goddesses, and they were respected and valued. And it was in the 1800s in the Germanic language that it came in as profane. And so that's a huge empowerment when we can say that and own it and make it sacred within ourselves. So thank you. Did anyone else want to say something?
One other word that we use loosely when we're angry or whatever, and it's the word fuck. And most people don't realize that it actually means fornication under the consent of the king. So it was
an acronym.
It truly was. It was that's how much human experience was controlled. So that is the origins of that word. So when we say that, we're actually asking to be controlled. So we need to really watch that. There's so many things we just throw out and we don't know what it means.
I need another good word now.
Yeah.
Boy, that's such a good release word.
Well, I just want to say that.
Hi.
I just want to say that again about language. That when I was first learning about this whole idea about changing the language, which was much more subtle in those days, but we didn't know as much. But one of the things that they said was humans had rights.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, kings had rights, priests had rights, humans did not have rights. And that's how somebody had to language it, was the way they put it. I think that's Werner Erhardt's word. Somebody had to language it in order to make it into something that became real. But once again, we're talking about how we speak and how we refer to, how we use our language, and to really understand. When you look up words, it's really kind of exciting because there's a whole lot of stuff in the dictionary that's buried about what that word really means. So it's kind of exciting just to do that.
Exactly. And always look for the word origin, because the current definition can be very different than the word origin. Tanya, I think you wanted to say something.
No, I'm just excited about the conversation. Love it.
No, but Brenda does. Let's bring Brenda into the call. Brenda is the co-director with Joan in Compassionate Capital. I beg your pardon, co-director of the regional women and girls sector in Capital Region, and she has her hand raised.
Oh,
Hi there. Good morning.
hi, Brenda.
Hi, Brenda.
Great conversation. I love the origin of words, always working with them to help set a new vibration, which is actually an older vibration of the origin. And what I feel that Eve Onsler has done with this, and all of the women that have stepped into these roles, have really been able to then speak from their womb and really own it. And you know, that we were having a conversation the other day about the word vagina, and we have so many women, even still, that are younger than us, that are still embarrassed about that word, about having a conversation, about going to see the monologues. And it just touches my deep within my belly, us owning our space. If you look in our history, that womb and that belly was, where we reside. And when we evacuated it and went into our head to become like men, we did a great disservice to ourselves. And so I am so thankful for all of you and how we are embodying that womanhood.
And is it fair to say, Brenda, that we may have also done a disservice to men along the way?
Of course we have. Of course we have. And I was having a conversation the other day, and, God help them. men have a little bit harder time controlling themselves because everything of them is on the outside. It's just easier for them to, gosh, have trouble. Let me just say it that way. And so then we've been perpetrated and told that we are supposed to protect them from their trespasses by covering ourselves and controlling ourselves, you know, as if we're the problem. And so, oh my goodness, you know, what have we done to ourselves, all of us? And, you know, speaking of words, I always spell the word ourselves, OURCELLVES, because as we clear the cellular memory of the trauma within each of us, which is what so many of us are doing, we are really rising up and clearing for woman and for the man, because the man was birthed inside our womb. We all come from the same place.
Thank you, Brenda. And you know, I heard something really profound to consider, is that back in the 60s, women gave themselves permission to develop their divine masculine. But what ended up happening is, because we didn't have that sacred element in there, we thought that power meant to be more like a man.
Right.
And in that process, we forgot or left out giving men permission to develop their divine feminine.
Right.
And so I think as we embrace the sacredness of what was being said about, you know, being human, that allows a container for us to really embrace the divine, the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine within each of us. So thank you. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
This is Shalania, and I don't have any icon for raising my hand, but I'd like to raise my hand.
You're on. We hear you, Shalania.
All right, good to be here. What a beautiful conversation, you know, and I love this whole thing of changing the myths, changing the stories, and the languaging. And I think part of what I was noticing is that we're in transitioning right now, and I think maybe we're stuck in a noun instead of a verb. And I mean, not as a criticism, but just as looking at, I don't want to do that, be stuck in the past or in the present or in the future, but be in the now. And I think using the gerunds, like transitioning, co-creating, languaging, which is in older language, not in older language, but in Native American languages and some of the other indigenous languages, there's a tendency to speak more in terms of the present. And I know that a lot of the way that we speak from linguistic theory, a lot of the things that way that we say, which was said by someone else, I think, well, anyway, a lot of things have been said, and that we can affect our thinking, our speech can affect our thinking and our action. And that being present here, co-creating as we are a new world, co-creating Vision 220, languaging, how are we going to use words is really important. And so I'm just here enjoying and all of the conversation, and I just like to want to put that into the middle of the circle for some, just as my offering. So thank you.
Thank you. And Shalania also does sacred healing of the womb, and also ritual around blessing water. So thank you.
Excuse me, for some reason, I'm not seeing hands raised. I'm getting messages that people are raising their hands. So I'm going to apologize right now and let you know there's something funky going on my side. But I hear that Charles Barker has his hand raised. Is that right? Hey, Charlie, I have to introduce you all, first of all. Welcome to V2020, but Dr. Charles Barker is the co-founder, head bottle washer of Compassionate Dallas Fort Worth, doing extraordinary things through the Charter for Compassion. He's been a friend of mine through the Charter and the Compassion Games actually for a very long time. So I'm so happy to see you here.
Thank you for being here, Charles.
Well, thank you very much. It's really But yeah, as the only guy on this call, it's a little bit awkward. But I must tell you that I'm just really impressed. I just want to listen. I want to be open to hear and to be able to take what you all have said so beautifully today and put it into action in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Gretchen's on this call, and she and I are in conversation about a number of things. But to just give you a little story of my own personal life, I lost my dad when I was like 8 or 9 years old. My mom was like 39 years old when he passed away. There were 3 of us small kids, a younger brother and a sister who was only a year older than myself. And I was raised in a just a loving environment, the womb, you might say. One that was very relational, a mom who I think expressed unconditional love to us kids. And so I have an affinity for the feminine gender, for women, for their for who they are. And so I think that that's why I'm maybe the only guy on this call. I don't know, but I can tell you that that I'm with you, and we in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, although we don't have that particular sector, is not really active at this point in time. But my hope is that some will come forward and be willing to participate and to build that particular sector in our area. So again, enough said. Thank you so much for letting me listen, and I will continue to listen. But don't expect me to say a whole lot unless unless the spirit moves me. But I also leave you with one last thing, and that is, I think that historically we have come from a conscience, rules, duties, responsibility in the sense of that kind of ethic, and also the Stuart Mills ethic of the greatest good for the greatest number. And we've lost sight of the individual human being and our relationship. So I like to talk about a relational responsibility and that response to others, not duty, but responsibility in that sense to other human beings. So I come from a relationality, responsibility ethic, and that's whatever I say, that's where I'm coming from, folks. So with that, I'll sign off and be quiet. Thanks, Sandy, for the opportunity to say something.
And thank you. Yeah, thank you, Charles. I think that really connects with the SDG 18, that when the stronger we have a sense of self, the more we think in terms of the other, and we want to be of service. So, thank you so much for pointing that out. And we're going to be wrapping up now. I can't believe how fast this went, and I wish we could have dove even deeper. We want to continue these conversations. We're looking at doing this series once every 6 weeks. So the next one will be April 4th, and I'm in the process of confirming, what that subject matter is. But everything as we move forward is going to be focused on how we strengthen who we are as individuals, because that is what I think is really that internal quickening that directs us more fully and deeply on the path of our highest purpose. And that's what we want. So I really want to take a moment to thank JJ, who's left the call, and Noelle and Tanya. You guys are amazing. We could talk so much more. I just loved everything that has been said. I'm so grateful for Sandy for giving me this opportunity and all the background work that was done to make this happen. So thank you, Sandy.
Oh, Joan, I didn't, you did it. You did it. I did the easy part by providing the platform through the charter, but I don't take any credit for this, but thank you. I appreciate your generous heart. But Joan, thank you. I met Joan about 4 or 5, 2 lifetimes ago. And on our first conversation, she told me about this vision for 2020, Vision 2020, and all that it meant. The 19th Amendment having its 100th anniversary and the 150th anniversary of the Mother's Day Peace Proclamation, and then having 2020 vision, and how 2020 was numerically just a really powerful number. I mean, it was just the time was coming, and we knew we were moving into that. And what were we going to do to midwife this transition we were in? And this was going to be the mile marker for us. This was going to be the signpost, right?
Well, and I want to add, Spirit divinely brought us together before we knew each other, before we actually met in 2014. Our United Nations International Day of Peace was in Carmichael, and we had the privilege of having Fumi John Stewart come and do the peace pole and flag ceremony of all the nations on our planet. And Renee Marie was there. It was just an incredible experience. But our little town of Carmichael represented the United States along with 7 other countries. And our peace poles were acupuncture needles for peace, as we consciously planted peace on the planet. And Sandy was on that call, and we didn't know that until we talked later. So it was really exciting that we're part of a bigger plan that we don't always have the full picture of. I think it'd blow our minds if we did, right?
Yeah, definitely. We couldn't handle it.
Yeah, thank you all for calling in. We're so excited, and April 4th will be our next call. We'll be sending you information, and there's going to be lots of marches and things happening in March and April. So, check where you live locally on how to be involved, and check out the Vagina Monologues. Get other people, consider participating in the Vagina Monologues if you never have, and let's rock and roll.
Let's rock and roll. Keep an eye on the Charter for Compassion. There are all kinds of things always going on. Join us on Facebook. You're going to get an email with everything that I can possibly remember to send you in this from this call. So thank you all.
Many blessings. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.